Got your last words here, all over my mind for another year. I gotta replace you, dear.
This is an artist nobody's ever heard of, really. So we're just at the beginning of trying to get his music out there. When he was alive, he really wasn't compatible with social media, putting his music out at all. So we're kind of, starting from ground zero with his stuff, which we've, had on our hard drives for 15 years or something crazy now.
Since 2011, 12.
Yeah. So, yeah, but this is our first podcast interview like this, talking about him.
Yeah. I mean, so he and I are also in a band called Ivy, and we've done a bunch of podcasts for that. But you are our first podcast for Stroik.
And we're talking going back to 2010, and this has only become more so the case. But as the music industry has obviously really as kind of the I guess the wealth gap has really increased in the music industry. Like, you really do have to do everything yourself, and you really do have to know social media, and it's hard. I mean, there isn't really a way to get out there. There isn't really a machine to help you get your stuff out there if you can't do Instagram.
Yeah. And I think, a band like Ivy or my other band, Freedom Fry or Stroik, it's like, I think, I'll speak for us. I don't think it's really in our nature to put ourselves out there in videos so much. We're fighting against our nature every time we're doing this. Hey guys, check out this new single. It goes against, I don't know, who we are as people. But the fact that that's the way the modern industry works, we kind of play the game a bit, but certainly not as much or probably as well as other newer artists who just grew up with it.
And that was Drew's Achilles heel, really, if we're talking about Stroik. I mean, that was really his undoing, was his inability to kowtow to any sort of industry standards of presenting yourself on stage, making videos of yourself. He really was like the antithesis of that, to his detriment.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he was able to sell his stuff on a very basic level, in that he was motivated to get it out there. It sounds like he was just sending letters like crazy at a certain point, and finally, connected with, I think it was you, Andy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was reaching out to me and sending these demos that were equal parts horrendous and equal parts senior. The horrendous part was that he had no equipment, so he was playing stuff into his computer without knowing how to fix the timing. In music talk, we call it quantization, right? To quantize the feel is to put it on a grid, make it sound more robotic or consistent, solid, whatever the terms are. He didn't know anything about any of that, so he's playing his music with his fingers. He's playing the drum patterns with his fingers, and he's not correcting it. So it's very loose and sloppy, and he would just create 50 different layers, parts, all with a $100 Yamaha keyboard, and then he would send these demos off to me, and because he knew about my band Ivy, and he also knew about Brookville, which was the other band I was in, and he liked those bands. He was just sending me fan mail basically, and he would attach a cassette tape in the letter, and then eventually he was sending me MP3s by email, and they were just really, Bruce was on the same page as me. We were really intrigued because the songwriting was absolutely genius, but the delivery of the music itself was just like something your 7-year-old would come up with if you gave him an hour on your equipment.
That's maybe part of the charm, right? I mean, some of the kind of the great, I don't know if you would I don't know if you can call him an outsider artist. That's probably like a bridge too far. But like your Daniel Johnstons of the world, like that's a big part of their charm.
Absolutely. And Elliott Smith, I mean, for sure. But this was a level below that because remember, he's, at least with or at least with Elliott Smith, he had a record deal. He was, making the music was done pretty professionally. But the stuff that we were hearing originally, Bruce and I, was really what we would call bedroom basement tapes from a person who didn't even know how to do the basics of recording bedroom basement tapes. But deep inside those really raw MP3s he was sending, you could hear the quirkiness in his voice. And I mean that in a good way, the charm, the quirkiness, the melodies just soared out of it. And the creativity, it was oozing with creativity. And we would just like the idea of getting him in a real studio, or at least a better one, under the tutelage of, somebody like me or Bruce or both of us, that was really intriguing. And that's really how we started with Stroik. We went from these MP3s from some kid working in a factory in North Carolina to taking a leap of faith and bringing him up to New York and having him work with Bruce.
And I don't think Andy would have necessarily involved me, except that, Stroik, being as eccentric as he was, he would record his files and then delete everything except for the final master. So there was no way to change anything ever. So if Andy liked a track, a song, like, oh, maybe we could fix the timing. Nope. And this is not, this is so far ago that you didn't have AI stem separation where you could go in and split everything out and maybe fix something. This was like, nope, that's what you got. That's all you had. So,
and he saved them at, even in the world of MP3s, there's different levels of quality of MP3s, right? There's the highest quality and the middle and the lowest, right? The lowest is so grainy and distorted, and he was saving all his songs in the lowest quality MP3s possible and then deleting all the original files. So all we have for the rest of his life are those like tiny 1.2 megabyte MP3s of his songs. So that was the real challenge when we realized it was either release that or start from scratch with him in a better studio.
Obviously a lot of this is idiosyncratic, but like I have to ask I was reading something, it might have been the thing that Ken sent along, but that the suggestion there as far as deleting everything was that he just didn't know that he could back it up on a hard drive, which seems I'm not sure I buy that entirely. I wonder if to a certain extent there was maybe a little bit of self-sabotage involved in some of this.
That's an interesting theory, and I don't totally disagree with it.
Yeah, I can see that because there were elements of that all throughout the way he behaved, both simultaneously thinking he was God's gift to music and then being very insecure about what he was doing, years, after everything fell apart, and he was given back his music, he would put a song on YouTube or on Bandcamp or somewhere, and if he received like one negative comment, he would like immediately pull it off. Like he believed in his heart, I think, that he knew it was good, but he just couldn't take any criticism from the world about it.
And the more something gets out there, the more opportunity there is for it to be criticized.
Yeah.
Right. And, so maybe, Freud would say that wasn't an accident that he couldn't find his hard drive with all the masters, or that he deleted it, or that the hard drive crashed and broke. But, the story that Bruce and I were told when we met Drew for the first time was, I think some of his songs were gone because he moved and couldn't find the hard drive. And then some of the other songs were gone because the hard drive that they were on had died and he threw it out. So we heard a lot of stories and reasons why the original files for his songs were gone. But that's what Bruce and I were facing. We were like, well, we'll never get to the bottom of it, so we won't really know. But the truth of the matter was, all we had were those low quality MP3s, and there was no way we could release them. So we had to start from scratch.
Part of the reason why I ask, and whether it was subconscious or not, is because It sounds like so you take, as you said, a leap of faith. You sign him. You bring him into the city. You're recording this. I think it was in Bruce's place, right? That you were recording the songs.
Yeah.
And the wheels are in motion. Things are starting together, and then it seems like things fell through almost immediately.
He was pretty. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, but Drew was pretty stable and charming and lovely and accommodating, and that dark side that was mostly there at the end wasn't really present in the recording process. Not that I remember, right?
That's right. It emerged later when he was forced to do stuff he didn't want to do. Really, the
like
promoting,
film music videos and
Yeah.
get on stage and play for people, and everything that he was introverted and maybe agoraphobic. Like he was scared of crowds, scared of people. He was shy, introverted. So he was fine during the recording of the record. It was when the business stuff kicked in, hey, we need this stuff from you. We need you to book shows. We need to see get a friend and get your iPhone and film some, lip syncing to some of your songs. So we'll put it in a music video. Like all of this stuff was just really both repugnant and I think scary for him. Maybe it was just basically scary. So it was repugnant to him, but the truth is deep inside, he was like petrified. I don't know.
He wanted his music to speak for itself. I think that's the email that he would send, because his emails started to get more and more toxic and kind of maybe a bit threatening. And
this is after we done the record.
After we'd done the record, yeah. He would send emails to Andy, like you said, Andy, like, get my music out there. When the world hears, they'll realize, like, send my music to Pitchfork. Send this to Jimmy Iovine. Send this to Scooter Braun. He would just name these names, and just like, he firmly believed that if the music was just released, it would blow up. And, Andy signing this unknown kid from North Carolina, it's a bit like, well, that's not really how it works. If we do that and no one notices it, it's just going to be forgotten. You need to put your best foot forward, have a live show, have stuff. And Andy, I don't think you even knew at the time that he had to basically drink himself into oblivion to get on stage.
No, I
had no idea.
No.
But that was something you discovered because Andy sent a documentarian, this guy Josh Stoddard, down to North Carolina to finally film him when it became apparent he wasn't going to film anything. And so they booked Drew a show in Chapel Hill, and Drew just got out of his mind, wasted. I think he drank a full bottle of vodka. And we have video of it that we put in this documentary we made about Drew. And at one point, Josh mentions the following day, Drew's plugging in his keyboard. He's like, why isn't this working? And Josh says, well, you did kind of fall down the stairs with it last night. So it's just like and Josh frankly talks to him in this documentary. He says, like, I think your show would be better if maybe you didn't drink so much. And Drew says, well, that's what I have to do to play live.
But that's not, drinking to some extent in order to play live is not an entirely uncommon phenomenon.
We all have drinks before we go on stage. I mean,
Yeah.
Everybody has some inhibitions to some degree, and you need to loosen up. And that part we understand. But I don't think I know anyone who drinks a whole bottle, entire liter, before they go on stage. I mean, if you see the footage from his show, the one show that we forced him to do, he's playing a song on his back, laying on the ground, with his, staring up at the ceiling with his feet kicking up in the air, like kind of, he's not holding the mic. He's just kind of yelling up into the rafters, and the mic's kind of picking him up. I mean, he was like incoherent. So he took what most people do, getting a little bit loosened up with a drink or two or three or four. And he brought it to the whole, he did the whole bottle. There was clearly some severe, he's very inhibited in a lot of ways. He was like a real contrast, because when you met him in person, he was very shy, and it made sense that he would have a lot of fear of getting up on stage in front of people, because when he would come into our apartment with me and my wife, and because he stayed with us every weekend, he came to New York for 3 months straight every weekend and worked with Bruce, but he lived with me and my wife, and he was the sweetest guy, very, self-effacing and shy, and like I had a hard time imagining him getting up on stage. But I have met other people in my career who were like him, and they get up on stage and they're just monsters, It's the Jekyll and Hyde. So I didn't know which way he was going to go, but I remember Josh, the documentarian, calling me from after his gig and saying, "Boy, oh boy, I think we have a problem. This kid is like he was out of his mind, drunk." And so I think for Drew, the Jekyll and Hyde was that he was very sweet in front of us, and then the other face was that he was just like he would get completely obliterated and then be very belligerent and angry, and but also a disaster on stage. So there was nothing really redeeming in the live show, and you've got to be able to get up on. I mean, unless you're like Steely Dan or something, and you have, you're just not going to play live because you're not comfortable.
They started playing live, so
they did, but they got huge, and then they had
Yeah.
the luxury of not playing live because they didn't like it anymore. Or even the Beatles, eventually just didn't like the. So I get that, but as an indie label, my label, running an indie label, like I'm struggling just because I'm a small label with not a lot of resources. So to have an artist who's not going to play live, okay, well then send me tons of content. Send me lots of videos of yourself, and wouldn't do that.
You said forced him to do in reference to the show, which is a wild thing to say.
I coerced, it was
but even so, you know what I mean? Like that.
Oh yeah, right. That we have to be strong arming the artist to actually play a show, right? Yeah. I just wish that I feel bad because he really was a creative force and a sweetheart of a guy, and he really was, and one of the most talented people I've ever met. And I would have loved to just be like independently wealthy and just said, you know what, I'm going to just spend $500,000 and just let you record to your heart's desire, and I'll hire the best team and they'll just do all the social media for you. But this was at the dawning age of social media. This was 2009, 2010, and we were just coming off of MySpace, and it was all about artists doing their own work on, it was a few years later that, bigger artists could hire a PR team and they would run their social media. But back in 2009 with Drew, like he had to do it, and he wasn't willing to play live. And so it was very inhibiting for a small label like me to know what to do with him. I didn't want to sabotage his record, but I didn't want to put it out until we had all the ducks lined up, and those ducks were all being shot by Drew. Like he was just had a big gun. He's like, like there's nothing to line up, So in the end, we either released the record like he wanted, with no fanfare, no social media, no videos, and lose money. And I probably was willing to do that. In the end, I think Bruce and I both would have just said, okay, just screw it, let's do it. We'll put it out. But he was imploding, and that was showing up by very threatening, unhinged emails and phone calls that made our choice kind of obvious. And the choice was in the end to just like not get in, let him find his own path and give him the record back.
Putting out a record that nobody's buying probably would have made it spiral more.
It would have been terrible for I mean, God, imagine what would have happened had he had the chance to see that the world didn't care about his music.
I think in his head he thought that if the editor of Pitchfork got it, or Gorilla versus Bear, or one of these influential tastemaker sites, they would just greenlight him and his life would be, golden. He'd be good. he'd be working with Kanye, and in his mind, I think he thought that was just, this is, if you put my music out, just do it, Andy. Like, just put it out there because I'm sure this is going to happen. And it could, but it's a big gamble.
That's the approach that he took initially, and that kind of worked.
And it did work. Yeah, it did work. It got him a record deal. Got him a record deal and got him a record.
It did. I mean, if I looking back on that period, had we put it out then, I'm not sure the world was ready for him. When I first heard Still Woozy years later, I was like, oh my God, Still Woozy to me is embodying everything that Stroik was. And I feel like it's only in the last, 6-7 years that I think like Stroik's music really would have resonated. I think it's a great time for him now. I think he would have been early, and to be early with a small record label like me and without really a lot of, media and social media support. I think to your, Brian, to your point, he would have, like, God knows what's downward spiral he would have gone in to see that no one, the music was released and nobody cared.
I want to pull that thread a little bit. What is it? I mean, it sounds like you're describing something maybe sonically. What is it that the world has finally caught up to?
I think there's like a love for imperfection now, a little bit in music. I think there was a moment where everybody was trying to be very produced and hi-fi, but these kind of Mac DeMarcos and these kind of people, Tame Impalas, using heavy modulation and kind of things that are just slightly off feeling, where you feel like you're floating, and, the kind of masking these pop songs, they make you feel like it's a psychedelic version of a very, you could have been a bubblegum song, but because it's this modern kind of slanted sounding thing, I think Stroik was early to that. We would be in the studio and he would propose all these production ideas with me, like, oh, you need to detune that. That'll sound more emotional. Okay. Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Okay. So you detune a keyboard and, put phaser, whatever on things. Like he liked the imperfection in his sound, so
he liked being out of tune. He liked things out of tune. He liked his voice out of tune. He liked the instruments not being quite in perfect pitch. And I have to say, like, I'm more of a fan of his music now. I mean, for me, hearing Still Woozy for the first time, like 6 years ago or so, like I was just, I could not believe how much of Stroik I heard there. And I really feel like had Stroik been alive and putting out music, he could have toured. Stroik would be the perfect opener for Still Woozy. I think someday I don't know what the guy's name is, but it's the solo artist Still Woozy. If he hears Stroik, I know he's going to love him. They're cut from the same cloth.
Something I was just thinking about as we were talking, Bruce, you and I, before we got on, we were talking about like movie and film scoring and how that's, really at least a more steady job than a lot of other places in the music industry. And I'm wondering if, again, in order to be like an indie artist, in order to be in a rock band, yes, there are all of these things that you have to be, these hats you have to wear, you have to do social media, and you have to tour. But I don't know, is there a world in which there could have been a place for him that didn't require him to tap dance or to do all the things that he clearly didn't want to do?
I think he would have been capable 100% of doing any music required for a score or anything like that. I think that his fear of putting himself out there kept him in small town North Carolina. He would have needed to move to a city, make connections, and I don't know if that part he could have done as well. Because he sent us these emails that were unnerving, we never felt great about passing his music on to other people, even after, like I would have liked to help the guy so often, but when, even a couple threatening emails, even if afterwards he says, I'm sorry, I was drunk, like, hey, what's the problem? Like, artists get drunk. This is a classic rock star thing. It's like, explaining to him, like, because you do that, I can't introduce you to anybody, because I can't unleash that. I would feel awful if someone else I introduced him to started getting emails like that, and years later, now we've met his mom, and we know a bit more about his backstory, and how he got started drinking and all this kind of stuff. And it was making this documentary and releasing this that we got to know her, and she's so sweet. He came from a really loving family, and
she's good at social media.
She's amazing at it. She's really good at it. I mean, all along, she should have been his manager. He should have said, Mom, do this for me. I think she would have done it because she always believed in him more than anybody. And that's been great. Despite the tragedy, getting to know her and her husband, and, brief a little bit their other children. Yeah, I don't know. I think he could have definitely done the music part, but again, I don't know if he could have handled the business side of scoring, because it's a lot of dealing with people.
It's very enlightening to me to be having this part of the conversation, because reading like really top level of this, the story is you recorded him in 2010. He passes away in 2022. Seems like nothing happens in those intervening years, and now 3 years later the music's coming out. But this is it's not that you weren't in touch, and it's not that you didn't that you weren't rooting for him. But even so, I mean, it still had to be hard, and it still had to weigh on both of you when he did pass, and that music, that the stuff that you worked with on him was just sitting on a hard drive somewhere.
Bruce and I, because Bruce and I have been, we're best friends. We play in each other's bands. We're, very connected and always have been. So it's like every 6 months, we'd be getting together, and we'd be in a car, and we'd put on the Stroik record that we did in 2010. This might be 2017. We'd put it on 2019. We'd put it on 2021. And we just would look at each other like, what is that guy's problem? This music we gave him this record, it's done, it's finished. The artwork's done. It's mastered. It's like literally in his hands for free. We gave it to him. Like, what? We just couldn't understand it. But we're just so everyone's so preoccupied with their own lives. It's like the onus is on him to be steering the ship, and if we see this ship heading in the right direction, we'll jump on and blow in his sails. There was no opportunity to do that. And every, year or so, we get this flurry of absolutely, either adorable, flowery emails from him or unhinged. You just never knew what you were going to get. And so when he passed away in 2022, we couldn't, it was a huge blow, because he was an adorable, sweet, talented guy, really. And then there was this body of work that we had done in 2010. It was like, my God, now he's gone. What? It's never going to get heard, because he's gone. So if it wasn't for his mom really sort of rallying and getting Bruce and I together, his music his record wouldn't be coming out. This documentary wouldn't be made about the story of his life. It is bittersweet, but the irony is that while he was alive, he couldn't do it. He couldn't make it happen.
What was it his mom did to really kickstart these processes?
It was just posting on TikTok, and she said at first she couldn't bring herself to share the music, but that she didn't want it to die with him. And so she started posting it, and it wasn't until she wasn't ready to do that immediately. So it was a few months later after he died. A few months had passed, and she reached out to me, I think on Instagram, saying, "Hey, this is Drew's mom. I just wanted to let you know he passed away." And I saw that she'd been sharing the songs, and I told Andy about his passing, and
you two weren't even aware at the time.
We weren't aware. No. He had been living in Pueblo, Colorado. He'd moved out there, I think, with his uncle and his grandma because it was cheap. But it's I guess it's one of the most dangerous places in the country. yeah, I don't know I think he'd been working in a factory out there, and unfortunately, he was messing around with fentanyl. I don't think he intended to die, but it's very, very sad. But yeah, so his mom, I forget who proposed the idea, but either it was us or her was like, let's just partner on this and get this music out, so it's not just sitting on our hard drives. And then it started to get more and more elaborate. Like, well, it's going to be like before. He's not here to do shows. Like, what are we going to use to market this or get a story out? And it's like, oh, maybe we can do a documentary. What about that stuff Josh shot when he was in North Carolina? So then we were combing through it, and then I edited a first version of that. And then we started also sending the music to people. We started to send it to publicist Ken Weinstein, who responded like, I love this. Let's talk. And I sent it to a sync company who I didn't even know. It was a cold email, like just telling his story a little bit. And they responded saying, we love this. We hear something in this.
Right.
Now,
Sync companies, their job is to place music in TV shows, commercials, and movies.
Yeah. So very soon we had this kind of dream team of people that he would have loved to have on board before. And, that's totally bittersweet. But it just makes me feel happy for his mom, because she sees that her son's music is truly special, and that people respond to it, and that he gets to live on. I think, if you believe in anything spiritual, it kind of feels like he's up there moving some stuff around, making some stuff happen.
Yeah, I definitely want to see the documentary. But so the live show is featured in the documentary. There is some footage of that.
You'll see him on his back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's part of the story, right?
Yeah. Us, him, professing his love to Josh at this Mexican restaurant. He's talking about how he loves bands that get drunk. He loves the Pogues, and he loves, he's in his mind, he's like, giving himself an excuse to
he's
do
Robert
that.
Pollard. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
it was cute too in the documentary, because Drew didn't know he was that drunk. He was shocked when Bruce told him, he was shocked when Josh told him, yeah, last night you were pretty drunk out of your mind. He was like, really? I wasn't that drunk. And then Josh is saying, yeah, you sang out of tune. Really? I sang out of tune. He's so cute.
Just in disbelief. It's like, really?
Yeah, he had such an adorable, charming, childlike side, but my God, what a wickedly creative mind he had. I mean, he just, no one sounds like Stroik. No one has and no one will. I mean, to me, if Elliott Smith and Still Woozy had a child, that would be Stroik.
After having talked to you guys, I think the thing that maybe, again, not having seen the documentary, but the thing that perfectly distills the person that you're describing is the moments in the music video in the laundromat when the woman, who I think is a friend of one of yours, is kind of trying to dance on him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That really awkward interaction seems to be like a very pure and very real moment from him.
Yeah. It's such a great memory for me, because that was my laundromat in New York City, and we had recorded, earlier in the day, and then we walked down to my laundromat. Andy was saying, we need some content. So, it was at that time period, it wasn't an iPhone. I had my flip camera, and people are coming in and out of doing their laundry. And originally I was just going to film him playing his keyboard in there, because the song was called Wash and Repeat. And then I called my friend Leah. I said, hey, can you come down? I didn't even know, I just wanted her to be like the girl in the video. I didn't even know she could dance. And she came down and she just like went for it. She was amazing. I love that video.
Yeah. But you can see in that video his awkward charm. Yeah. Equal parts charming, equal parts awkward, but loving every minute of it.
Andy, you especially recently went through the process of combing through archives for the Ivy record. Maybe in some ways similar, not knowing whether that would ever come out, and with the passing of a bandmate. I'm wondering if there's, obviously a lot of this depends on how this record does, but is there any thought given to those hundreds of other songs that have been recorded?
Are you
The Stroik songs.
Stroik songs?
Yeah.
I think that yes. I mean, if this current album does well enough and there's a demand for it, then Drew has hundreds of other songs. Now, unfortunately, because we've already talked about this in this podcast, but they're only those crappy quality MP3s. However, it is 2025 going into 2026, and we now have AI, which can extract all the individual tracks. We could never do this before. So we do now have and will have the ability to take those mixes and pull out the individual parts, get his voice on its own again, and at least present it so that it's sounds acceptable, right? So yeah, but it's predicated on how this current album and its documentary does.
Yeah, because he's got a lot of gems that are in that form, like, and even covers. He's got some great covers he did that are just sitting there.
I assume that the stuff was recorded more professionally, but was that a similar process with some of the stuff that Adam had recorded?
Adam and Ivy? No, it's different. It's different because in Ivy, so Adam and I were both the songwriters in Ivy, and half are my songs, half are his songs, but oftentimes we would get together and he would present an idea, or I would present an idea. We'd get together in the studio and we would just sort of jam. And if it was my idea, I might be playing the guitar and he'd be on drums. And if it was his idea, it'd be flip. He'd be on guitar and I'd be on drums. So we had a lot of ideas spanning our career like that were just a groove or an idea or a little demo. Sometimes Dominique, the singer, was singing on it, and sometimes not. So we found a treasure trove of unfinished ideas like that. And many times I could only remember who originated the idea by who was playing the guitar. If I hear myself on drums, I'm like, oh, that's an Adam idea. And that's Bruce, so we brought Bruce in early on for those Ivy recordings to kind of go through and sift through what Bruce thought had the most potential, and then we would flesh them out. So that's very different from, Stroik really was a lone warrior. I mean, he did everything. He was like a mad scientist in his bedroom doing everything, every single instrument.
And the Ivy ideas were all more hi-fi. They were well recorded.
Yeah.
You had the stems. So
Adam and I owned a pretty established recording studio in New York City, a commercial studio called Stratosphere Sound. So we would, every idea we would record there was on like just pristine. It just sounded great. So very different from the antithesis of what we got from Drew.
Is Ivy something that continues to live on? I mean, obviously, you're enjoying this process, and you seem really kind of reinvigorated by it.
I think so. Me, Bruce, and Dominique found basically out of 60 or 70 ideas that Adam and I had started together. We narrowed it down to ultimately finishing 21. And then we split that into two separate records. So the first one is Traces of You, and that's 10 songs, and that came out this past September 2025. So there's another record. The remaining songs are coming out next year. And there's others too. The mandate is that Adam has to be playing on every one, or it wouldn't. So, but there's many, many more that didn't make the cut that I think we can go back to. So again, it's the same answer to Stroik with his hundreds of other songs. If there's enough demand for these Ivy songs, these new songs, then we'll keep going back. Me and Bruce and Dominique will keep going back into our archives and pulling more out and doing more.
You're talking a little bit about having these conversations with his mom and finding a little bit about his childhood. I know not very easy. I think she was a single mother, and they, dealing with some poverty, but also I went down a couple of rabbit holes and read some slightly conflicting versions of living above a funeral home with the father of the bass player of Veruca Salt.
Yeah. So, so Drew would always spin his story to us like he was a broke kid. And after I connected with his mom, she dispelled all that and basically said, no, like, you know, I was a single mom, and he was sad that he never met his real dad. And that was probably a source of a lot of his issues. But yeah, they lived, he had a loving family. They were not broke. They lived, their first place where he was living, it was Chicago, in this funeral home of, I think it was his grandma's boyfriend's. His grandma's boyfriend owned this chain of funeral homes in Chicago. And it was, I guess the guy's last name was Lack. And it was like the dad of, or something.
Steve Luck. Yeah.
Of the Veruca Salt guy. So they would be rehearsing in there, and that's where Drew got introduced to music. He would go jam on their drums. I don't know if
they left the drum set in the basement of the funeral home or something, and then that's where Drew learned to play drums.
Yeah.
Isn't that a crazy story?
Does that make it into the documentary?
I don't know. I think he mentions it in passing. It's very
passing.
brief.
Yes, it does, but it's very it's not that clear. They don't dwell on it. There's also, what was it? There's something about where they filmed
Scarface.
Yeah,
I think it was in Florida. I don't want to mess up their story, but his mom's boyfriend for a while lived in the house where they shot Scarface. Wherever that was. Yeah, Miami. Yeah. And
they moved around a lot, but you know, when you meet Drew's mom, she's really, you can tell they may not have had a lot of money, but you know, when you're a little kid, I mean, unless you're on food stamps, like what you sense is your safety, you know, and the love around you. And I think she emanated a lot of that. And early on, you know, she had, you know, Drew grew up with a stepdad, right? Connie's husband.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it was great.
Yeah. So he had a really supportive, loving background. It just, he was a songwriter and an artist and a poet, and he liked to spin stories. And we heard a lot of crazy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've seen photos of his childhood. We've seen videos of his childhood. He was spoiled. He had everything in the world. He had every toy you could think of. And he was a soundtrack kid. He was like, you know, he loved soundtracks, and you can hear that in his music. You know, he's listening to like the Lion King soundtrack and these things and he loved movies. I saw his drawings from when he was a kid at the house. He would make his own movie posters and stuff. And, you know, there was a lot of the emails we'd get too. Lists of songs and lists of movies.
He was working when Bruce and I met him, and when he was coming up to New York City to record, he was working in a vending machine factory in North Carolina, and he was getting rides to the factory from his uncle because he had lost his license from too many DWIs. So there was you know, a lot of trials and tribulations.
There was a bad sequence of events where he smoked pot in high school, got kicked out, and I guess he was able to go back at some point, but didn't want to show his face at this high school. He felt embarrassed, and so he just never went back. And got a job at a factory, and he was living at home, but then he started sneaking their vodka, their drinks, and he would get angry when he would drink. And so they said, you can't live here, you know, you can't live here anymore. You know, it's okay if you don't drink, you can stay here as long as you want, you can live here. But since you're drinking and you have this anger issue, you can't live here anymore. So he started to live on his own.
It was really the same social problems, and it was the same problems that really torpedoed the music career, or also just kind of followed him around in other aspects of life, it sounds like.
Yeah it was. But I think it's nice to know his music is out there, and I felt great on release day. You know, it wasn't too big fanfare. The record didn't come out to big fanfare again because, you know, nobody knows him. So we're now kind of trying to build it up, but it's...
You knew it was going to be a slow burn. It has to be a slow burn, right?
Yeah, but it felt good. It felt like something that had been long overdue finally came to pass. And I felt like Andy and I did right by him. by
I think the
putting
word
this effort in.
closure really does matter sometimes. And there was a lot of there was lack of closure with Stroik,
Yeah.
like from our relationship with him to the music that we made, because, putting aside who he is and you listen to that record objectively, it's a great record. It's well produced. Like, Bruce did an amazing job. And he and I are, and I'm proud that I discovered and signed him. I'm proud of what Bruce did with him creatively. And, there was no closure. It was like, it's terrible to have something you're so proud of, and it's just, you have to play it for people when they come over to your house on a Saturday for dinner, that's the only chance they're going to. So there was a lot of closure when his record came out recently. And there was closure with respect to our relationship with him, and feeling like we did right by his mother, and just knowing the world's, and now we can go on Spotify and I can play it for people finally.
I don't know if you guys go through this too, but every time like one of those like numero group records come out or something, and it's this lost artist that nobody has heard the song, somebody discovered a acetate or something. It's both like an incredible feeling that there's so much great music out there, but also really melancholy that there's just so much incredible stuff that you will probably never be able to hear in our lifetimes.
Yeah. There's no shortage of music. Good music too. There's like,
yeah,
it's hard to promote new stuff now, but it's also great that this time period, I sometimes wonder if I was born in the wrong time for stuff. And I'm like, no, you're crazy. Like, it's so easy to put out a song now. Anybody can do it. Like, I love the ease of just putting a song out. Like, back in the day, you'd need a label to do it. And there's just so many ways to just be in control of your own destiny.
More today.
Yeah.
But, it's a reminder that, for every one person that you follow as a music lover who you find like just immensely talented as an artist, there's like 3 other people just as talented, just as good looking, who are, that's your electrician that comes in to like fix, the outlet in your kitchen, or it's that they either didn't have the drive, or the ambition, or they didn't have the they had stage fright, whatever reason, after 5 years.
Sometimes it's just pure luck too, honestly.
Luck, actually, that's number one.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
And thankfully Drew is now going to be a little bit tilted away from that, because at least he now has a platform where anybody who can hear him, wants to hear him, they can hear him now.
Take off